Morning. I think we will probably start because the number of us have already joined, and I expect other people will just join along the way. So thank you very much for attending this webinar, and we're very pleased to present a recent piece of research that we've been conducting on barriers to the inclusion of women and youth in trade in the new environment of sort of digitization. So the research was keen to explore how these new potential sort of platforms and digital tools, which are growing in terms of their sort of scope and reach into MSME segments, will affect women and youth participation in trade. We've been partnering with a tech provider which provided the basis for this research. And the purpose of this particular study was to ensure that whatever was developed as part of that partnership would not create undue barriers for women and youth in terms of their participation. So this is actually part of a wider set of research that we're also conducting as FSD. We've been long interested in the role of businesses in MSMEs in terms of their contribution to inclusive growth and livelihoods. We're going to be conducting actually more studies. This is actually just the beginning of some studies that we're involved in at the moment, but we also want to be building up a portfolio of research on MSMEs over the next couple of years, and to be working with partners in both government and private sector to conduct this research. With that in mind, I want us to sort of, approach this particular study with the view that this is just the tip of an iceberg. It really opens a lot of questions about further areas that we need to be exploring in terms of our understanding of this segment and its contribution to sort of to Kenya's development going forward. So without further ado, I will introduce the consultants who have been working with us on this study. We have 71.4 from South Africa and G. Morich from Kenya, and they've been joining forces to conduct a qualitative and quantitative deep dive into this population. The population in question is actually retailers, retailers in Nairobi, with a particular focus on women and youth. But in order to understand the barriers and challenges that this population faces in their engagement with MSMEs and the implications of digitization for mitigating or possibly even intensifying those challenges. So I'll hand over to Claire and Carol, who will be giving the presentation. And then we will open the floor afterwards for questions. And and then we may even close a little early if we finish early. Okay, over to you then, Claire.
Thanks so much, Amrik, and hi everyone, morning, and thanks so much for joining this little feedback session. We've got quite a lot of information to show you, so I think we'll go through the slides, but I think if there are any pressing questions, I think feel free to interrupt us as we go. Carol and I will be sharing the presenting, so hopefully that runs smoothly, but just shout if anything's not clear, if you have a burning question that you want to ask that can't wait to the end. So basically, just quickly on what we'll be covering today, just starting off with a quick overview of the research objectives and methodology. I think Amrik did give some of that overview already. And then straight away jump into the impact of COVID-19 on the businesses. A lot of this research took place during the lockdown. So obviously that was front of mind for the businesses that Carol interviewed. And then to look in the third section at just wholesale and retail traders in Kenya, just to give some context on the sector and add some numbers to the sector. And then to kind of get into the main part of the presentation, which is really those challenges faced by retailers, and specifically looking at women, youth, and where digital solutions could provide some opportunities there. So just quickly on the methodology. So as Amrik mentioned, we were actually looking at a specific solution, but we found out a whole lot of other things, which is what we're presenting back today, not on that specific solution. And the main objective of the study was really to explore the challenges faced by retail traders in Kenya, with specific focus on those women and youth segments. And we also wanted to explore the barriers and opportunities to those segments to use digital solutions in their businesses. And the study had both the quantitative and qualitative elements. On the quantitative side, we analyzed 2 nationally representative surveys. That was the FinAcces survey, which was obviously pretty recent, and also the MSME survey, the micro, small and medium establishment survey from 2016. A main limitation on the quantitative side is that on that MSME survey, we only got access to the license sample. So that survey was done with 2 samples. There was a license sample that was drawn from county government lists, and then there was an unlicensed sample that was drawn from a household survey. So we didn't have access to that household sample, just the license sample. On the qualitative side, Carol and her team ran 36 interviews with grocery retailers in and around Nairobi. Those were done in April and May, so right over that COVID-19 lockdown. And the interviews were done face-to-face, but following strict protocols. And some of the limitations on the qualitative side is that older men, so men over the age of or age 36 and above, weren't interviewed. So a lot of their views aren't captured here. And also just to note that on the qualitative side, the definition of youth was quite broad, so 18 to 35 years old. So obviously in that segment, there was quite a range of business owners from recently established to more established. And then just to give a quick overview of those qualitative surveys. So there was 36 in total, and they ranged quite widely in terms of the type of store. So from small duka stores up to wholesale. So about half of them were duka stores, 7 super dukas, 6 mini marts, and 5 wholesale. And then just in terms of the profile of the respondents, you can see on the left-hand side there, we've just broken it down into younger females, so 18 to 35, which is the light pink section, and there were 20 respondents that fell into that segment. Females aged 36 and above, it's the dark maroon, and we had 5 respondents in that segment. And then the final 11 respondents were the males in the yellow portion there, aged 18 to 35. So as I mentioned, that all the interviews were done over that lockdown period. So obviously COVID-19 was front of mind for the businesses. So I think we thought we would start with just what that impact on the businesses was. So I'll hand over to Carol for this section.
Okay, morning everybody. So as Claire said, this was done at the peak, at the time when there was no travel outside Nairobi. So businesses had certain challenges. So basically what has happened is that COVID has had a negative impact on most of the small groceries. And one of the issues is that they have had huge drops in sales. Some of them report drops of up to 60%. And this is mainly because of reduced foot traffic. So they have had people who have since migrated to the villages when they lost their jobs. They've also had no children coming during the morning to buy the usual snacks, which are extremely valuable because they provide you some liquid cash very early. And then there is, of course, the reduced hours, and the reduced hours have not necessarily translated into increased sales in the other time slots. And then a big portion of their clients tend to be these little small hotels. And of course, those were no longer operating, so they lost a lot of money there. And then because of under pressure, everybody has less money for groceries. They tended to then go to the bigger stores like supermarket to shop there, or some of them opted to do online for some of the small items. And next, and then you can see from that quote there, for example, some of them were even having goods expiring in their shops. And this was because when lockdown was announced, people went out and did bulk buying from large outlets, and these little shops were left with dead stock. And then there is also the issue of stock prices have gone up. One of the issues they noted is that stock prices might be going up because of transport, and therefore their margins are decreasing. And then there is also there's also the issue of bad debt. So they have customers who have lost their jobs, and not only have they lost their jobs, their other investments payments are also not coming through. So some of them have rental property, but the tenants are not paying. So, they are unable to pay their debt. So they have a few customers. Typically, these small groceries do not give credit, but they have a few customers who they've had a relationship with, and they will give them some basic credit, which typically is paid in a month or so. But that has become a big problem for them. Next. Okay, and then it has also affected the relationship they have with their suppliers in terms of their ability to pay their suppliers on time. So a lot of them actually are going back to their suppliers and renegotiating for more time. And luckily, a lot of the small groceries do have pretty good relationship with some of the suppliers, but for some of them, it's almost impossible. For example, for milk and bread, it has to be paid on the spot. Next. And then what a lot of them have been doing is also postponing to get the permit. And as you know, the single business permit is compulsory for all outlets. And therefore, what it has created is that it has created an opportunity for them to be harassed by other people. Even sometimes they're not sure who these people who are harassing them are, they're from the county government or elsewhere. And also what came across is obviously some of these small outlets do not know that you can go online and actually apply for a permit. And you can see from that verbatim from one of the person, they have not applied for, they were not able to go to City Hall to apply for their permit, or they had applied and it was locked up somewhere. So a lot of them are not aware. And then something that has become very common is that they are having more family members getting involved in their business, where that can be positive because some of them are no longer having paid employees. It also has the issue of that you have too many people who are dependent on this business. And sometimes, especially where the business is run by the female and the husband gets involved, is that decision making is becoming more difficult and there's more pressure on that business to share out the little profit that they make. Next. So despite all that, respondents did mention that they are taking up various measures to try and cope. So some of them have increased their customer engagement, and we have little outlets who are sending out text messages or calling their customers and telling them, come in, I have brought this stock, or I haven't seen you for a while, just trying to build a friendly relationship with their customers. And then there's a lot more rationalizing of the inventory. So right now they are focusing on what is fast moving. And in the areas we were in, there's a lot of stocking of rice now, stocking of flour, stocking of pasture, because in areas that's popular. So they are making sure that what they have is actually going to move. And then we've had a few businesses, so though not this particular retail outlet, who have opted to open another small branch in a rural area based on the perception that they think that the impact is more felt in Nairobi than in those small areas. And then a lot of them, when you ask them, what are you planning to do in the next 3 years? Everything now is so vague and everything is focused on now and trying to survive. And you can see from that verbatim, just being consistent on how I operate is what really means. And I can no longer take loans because of the way the situation is unstable. So everything has been put on hold. The current situation also, because of this, the situation really does present an opportunity, for example, for digitization, because if it's going to be able to reduce the operating costs so that they can make a little bit more, that will be very important. And also if it's able to grow their customer base, because remember now they cannot, they're just looking at people who are walking in. How can they expand and get others who are just not having to walk in? But of course, some of these decisions will have to be postponed because, to be honest, this is not the time for them to take up any new significant investments. Next.
Thanks, Carol. So the next section we're looking at is, before we kind of get into the challenges and the kind of the real meat of the presentation, is just to get some context on the wholesale and retail trade in Kenya, and just to look at some data around the sector. So using the FinAcces data, we see a total of about 5.2 million business owners or self-employed people in Kenya. And we've just shown their main sector here. And you can see that the wholesale and retail trade really dominates, with over half, 54% of those business owners falling into that sector. The next largest sector, manufacturing, accounting for just 8% of those business owners. So really dominant. And those 54% of business owners account for about 2.8 million people. And if we just look at those 2.8 million people in the wholesale and retail trade, you can see that it's dominated by females. So 62% of those business owners are females, 38% are males. And in terms of age group, also quite a young profile. So just under half, 59% are 16 to 35 years old. And we can look at the gender and age together on an age pyramid that we have here. So you can see men in blue on the left and women in pink on the right. And we've got the ages from 16 to 25 at the bottom, up to 66 plus at the top. And what's quite clear from this pyramid is that you can see a bulge in that bottom right-hand corner on that at the bottom there. And that's quite a big skew towards younger women. So you can see in this sector, more than a third of them are women aged 16 to 35. So a big skew. We were also quite interested to understand the diversity in the sector because obviously there's a wide range in the sector, from almost hawkers on the side of the road up to your wholesale stores, which are doing much more B2B business. And we wanted to get a sense of that. And so to do this, we've used the MSME survey. So as I noted, that MSME survey, we only had the license sample. So already we're looking at a slightly more formalized part of the market. And if you look at all business owners in that sample that we got, we see 1.85 million. And if we look at those in the wholesale and retail trade, we get just over 1 million. So that's a lot lower than our 2.8 million we saw in FinAcces. And that's because of that different sample. And so because we're already looking at these licensed establishments, we thought let's focus on those slightly more formalized stores where they're operating from an actual premises. And so what we did is we said, let's only look at those businesses in the wholesale and retail trade where they're actually operating either out of a commercial premises or in a residential premises, but with a special outfit. So it's a proper store. And that structure must also be permanent or semi-permanent. And we found 811,000 business owners that fitted that. And then because we were also interested in the demographics of the business owners, we only wanted those establishments where the owners are the decision makers. So what we ended up with was 781,000 business owners that are the main decision maker in their business and that operate out of a proper store and that are licensed. And that 780,000 is who we looked at for a segmentation. And for the segmentation, we just ran a cluster analysis. We used a whole lot of profiling characteristics of the businesses, things like employees and registration status and access to financial services. And what we got was 3 segments came out of that analysis that pretty much range in the level of sophistication. So on the lower end, we've got our low sophistication businesses, and that accounted for just under a quarter of those 780,000 business owners. The biggest segment fall into this kind of medium segmentation, and that was just over 60%. And then the final 15% of those business owners fall into a high sophistication segment. So just to look at what differentiates these segments from each other. So in terms of the number of employees, and again, I think just to look at the different trends across these segments, you can see that the low sophistication business owners, they almost always have no employees. 95% have no employees. When we move to the medium sophistication, you can see that now businesses are starting to get some employees, mostly just 1. When we look at the high sophistication businesses, most of those businesses have 3 or more employees. So they're a lot bigger. In terms of business registration, so is the business registered by the Register of Companies? You can see that the low and medium sophistication segments, very few are, just 8 and 14%. Quite a distinguishing feature of those high sophistication businesses is that they're way more likely to be registered. And then we look at the usage of financial services, so specifically financial services in their business. Here you can see quite a big difference between those low and medium sophistication. So the low sophistication businesses, very little usage of financial services in their businesses. Almost none of them are using a bank account for their business. They don't have till numbers, they don't have business insurance, and about a quarter are using mobile money in their business. On the medium sophistication businesses, you can see that that jumps up quite a lot. So suddenly you've got over 60% using a bank account, over half using mobile money, and a till number slightly higher. And then again, with the high sophistication businesses, almost all of them are using a bank account. Almost 40% have a till number and business insurance. So a lot more usage of those financial services. In terms of their record keeping, again, you can see a big difference between those low and medium sophistication, where low sophistication businesses aren't keeping records really. And we've looked at just keeping any records, keeping cash and sales receipts, and then that bottom indicator, do they have sophisticated record keeping?
Tell him I'm on a call.
And the sophisticated record keeping, that includes things like your bank reconciliation statements, your complete set of accounts, and external accounting services. And so you can see that medium and high sophistication are far more likely to be keeping records. And quite a distinguishing feature of the high sophistication is that almost half of them, 45%, are doing some kind of sophisticated record keeping. And then just some access to devices. So we've got 3 indicators. Do they have a dedicated mobile telephone for the business? Do they use a computer for official purposes? And are they connected to electricity? And I just want to focus in on that middle indicator. So do they use a computer? And you can see again, quite a distinguishing feature of that high sophistication is that 60% of them are. On the low and medium, very little usage of a computer within their businesses. And then just finally, to look at the demographics. So looking at gender at the top, we've got, are there female-only owners, male and female co-owners, or male-only owners? And just comparing those low and high sophistication. You can see, for example, in the low sophistication, 35% are female only, 37% are male only. When we look at the high sophistication, only 15% are female only and over half are male only. So there's definitely a gender skew. And likewise with the highest level of education, again, quite obvious how the trend works. If you just look at that top indicator, have at least some tertiary education, you can see that as the business sophistication grows, the business owner is more likely to have that higher level of education. And just to bring a face to some of these profiles, some of the interviews that Carol did fitted quite well into the segmentation. So just to look at some of those profiles of what these segments would actually look like in real life. So starting with the low sophistication trader. So this is Felicia, she's 25 years old and she owns a Duca store. And she opened her shop less than a year ago, and it was with the support of her husband, who provided all the startup capital for her from his personal savings. And before starting this business, Felicia was a housewife, and she thinks that her husband helped her out, but just to keep her busy. So you can see from her top quote there, personally, I was fully sponsored by my husband to start this business. It was not a loan. He just wanted me to have something to keep me busy and also to be able to assist in the household budgets where possible. In terms of her daily operations, so she runs the store by herself between 6 and 10 p.m. However, her husband is very involved in the business. So, for example, he helps with stock taking, which takes place on Sunday, and he also helps sometimes with ordering supplies. And you'll remember that the low sophistication retailers very rarely kept financial records. So Felicia does keep some financial records, but they're pretty basic. Things like stock purchases and customer debts, and she keeps those in a notebook, in a physical notebook. And she thinks that works well for her. Her shop is not very busy, so her current method of record keeping works well. Some of her main business challenges include low sales and her credit customers taking too long to pay her back. And in terms of her business growth, you can see that she doesn't have major growth plans for her business. So I think the growth of my business is not entirely in my hands. I don't have other money avenues that I can channel into the business. I don't think it's because I'm a woman or a young person, just that business is slow and there is no money. Moving on to a medium sophistication example, and you'll remember that what really differentiated the medium sophistication from the low was that they kept more detailed financial records and had a much higher use of those financial services. And to represent this this segment, we've got Winnie, who's 32 years old, and she owns a super duper store. And her path to starting her business was very different to Felicia's. So she's an experienced retailer. She's had 2 businesses before opening this shop, and she used both her own savings as well as a SACCO loan to open this shop. So from her top quote, you can see, I've tried my hand at 3 businesses. I started selling fruits and vegetables along the road about 6 years ago. I was able to save enough money through our chummer, and I got 25,000, which I invested in beauty products with my cousin. She then grew her beauty product store and introduced M-Pesa, but she lost some money on the M-Pesa, and that's when she decided to go to open her store. And she used a combination of savings and loans, about 150,000, to start her shop. So she runs this shop herself. You'll remember most medium sophistication traders don't have employees, and she doesn't have anyone to assist her. She does occasionally ask her brother to sit in when she has to go out to run an errand, just so she doesn't have to close her shop. She believes her success in retaining customers is being friendly to them. She tries to understand their needs. She tries to sell goods in smaller quantities for them, and she also tries to offer additional services. So, for example, M-Pesa. She currently keeps business records. They are also in a notebook. She keeps things like her sales, stock purchases, and customer debt. But she's not very happy with this current method of recording. She finds her records are quite inconsistent, and she sometimes misplaces the book. So not working very well for her at the moment. So her biggest challenges are low sales and the security risk, especially because she keeps quite a lot of cash on her side because of her M-Pesa business. And I think what's also very different about her compared to Felicia is she has really big plans for her business. You can see her final quote: I want to convert this into a wholesale store, fully stocked with every kind of brand, and to buy directly from the factory. I also want to improve my mobile money service to cover all other banks. So quite a lot of growth opportunity for her. And then the final profile we've got is Dominic, 35 years old. He's a high sophistication retailer. And you'll remember what sets high sophistication retailers apart is much higher use of technology in the business, sophisticated record keeping, and usually they've got multiple employees. So Dominic opened his shop in 2014. It's a mini-mart store. He bought it from a friend for 250,000 shillings. And for that, he basically got the rights to the business name, some shelves, and 2 fridges. And he used his personal savings. He works as an auditor as well. So he had quite a lot of personal savings. And he also got a loan from a SACCO. And he used that to buy the business and also to renovate the premises. Unlike most sophisticated retailers, he doesn't actually have any employees. But he does have his wife who sits in the store mostly during the day. And that just allows him to run errands and also to do his auditing jobs on the side. Obviously, as an auditor, bookkeeping is important to him. And you can see from his second quote there, I'm an auditor by profession, hence bookkeeping is key in my business. I have a computerized system that gives me various reports on command, and that works out well for me in terms of checking business growth. The only challenge I have is getting my wife to use the computer system over a calculator. So aside from getting his wife to use his computer system, some of his other challenges include shoplifting. I mean, he's even installed a CCTV camera. And he also has quite big growth plans, and he plans on funding that growth with a SACCO loan. You can see there's a lot of diversity within those interview respondents that we got. And just to go back to the gender profile of these business owners. So looking at female only at the top, male and female, and male only, and just where they fall. And what's obvious is that the female only businesses are a lot more likely to fall into that low sophistication segment, 31%, and only 6% in the high sophistication segment. Unfortunately, the MSME survey doesn't have business owner age, but I think we can quite confidently state that a lot of those younger business owners are also going to fall into that low sophistication bracket, just because they also haven't had a chance to build their businesses yet. So I think a big part of this research was trying to understand how can women and youth business owners firstly make it slightly easier for them to start businesses, but also to encourage them and to make it as easy as possible for them to grow. And to do that, obviously, we have to understand the specific challenges facing them and what opportunities those present. So I'm going to hand back over to Carol for this next section.
Thanks, Jess. So the retail sector faces various challenges, and these challenges do cut across. However, they are more profoundly felt by the women entrepreneurs. So, for example, access to finance is an issue for all retailers. The reality is, especially when they want to expand their business or put in some significant investments, like let's say put in new shelving, expand the space, that's going to be a problem across the board. Across the board, they all have issues with stock management. And remember, some of these challenges, the actual respondents do not actually verbalize. They don't see it as a challenge. It's based on the analysis. And then record keeping, a lot of them don't keep the records, as we saw from what Claire presented. And then there's the issue of liquidity, more to do with operating capital for day-to-day. That becomes a challenge across the board. And as we go through, we'll see that it actually affects women more so than men. And then, of course, all those contribute to low margins. So why is there a difference? We find that older male retailers have more access to formal credit. So first and foremost is that male business owners are more likely to access credit for startup. And why is this? Is that men have access to the assets that are required, for example, to get collateral. They also have networks. Their networks in terms of friends who are able to give them substantive capital is very different from the networks for women. They also have assets that can be liquidated. We all know that culturally, almost every man has some land or some livestock in the village, which if need be, they can easily liquidate. And also because they're able to liquidate that, they're able to get to access higher loan levels in the banks or the SACCO. So men can liquidate some land or some livestock and then put the money in SACCO and almost immediately get 3 times what is invested. Yet women do not have that. And then, of course, it was said over and over again that men are likely to take greater risks. And of course, if you have more resources at your disposal, you're more likely to take on more risks. Next. And then the segment that really struggles a lot with capital is the youth. First and foremost, they are yet to create those social networks that can be able to support them in terms of even giving them any loan or a gift. Secondly, they do not have any assets. They need a lot more because they are almost always starting from zero and they have very little accumulated assets. They do have social networks, but those networks really do not have the resources to support them in any way. And as you can see from that quote, for youth, it sometimes becomes a big challenge raising capital for business. I had a dream of opening business, but every time I save some money, I end up using it for some pressing issue. Other people are able to manage because they have that network. And remember here, you can imagine these are 34-year-olds who had this conversation. So by the time they actually have any substantive business is sometimes way in their late 20s. And then women business owners tend to prefer saving to taking credit. And what happens is that women are good savers and therefore they build their business through accumulating little by little. And therefore what happens at any one point, they will not take any huge risks because everything is financed purely by the money they've been able to accumulate. Of course, maybe later on, one of the things we might want to understand is, does that then mean that women businesses are less likely to fail than those for men? Probably not, because women overall still don't have enough resources to put in that significant amount of money that will give you that takeoff that you need. You can see that also there's a quote there about men take risks, they depend on loans and SACCOs. And one thing about women is that even where they have that opportunity to take formal credit from a bank, they seem to be, there's an aversion to banks. You know, there's the whole narrative that, you know, you're likely to lose everything seems to come across very strongly amongst women. Next.
So just to quickly look at some data on that, just to see what the data says in terms of access to capital and access to credit. So what we've looked at is some FinAcces data. So here we're looking at all business owners in the wholesale and retail trade. So that was those 2.8 million business owners that we saw earlier. And we're looking at 3 different segments. So women aged 26 and above, men aged 26 and above in the pink, and then youth 16 to 25 in the green. And just a note on that youth segment, if you think back to that age pyramid, that youth segment is really dominated by females. I think over 70%, 72% of that youth segment is females. So just to keep that in mind when we go through it. And the FinAcces asks a question about what is the main source of startup capital? So obviously a lot of people are going to use multiple sources. So just a note that this is the main source, so we won't see that. And what we've done is we've just looked at those sources in some groups. So was it a gift, income, or assets? Was it savings, or was it credit? And firstly, what you can see is that pretty much all business owners in the sector needed startup capital. Very few didn't need any startup capital. What's also clear is that assistance or a gift from family and friends is quite a lot more important to women and youth business owners in the sector. So almost 30% of women, 26% of youth saying that was their main source of capital versus only about 12% of men. So far more significant for women and youth. For men aged 26 and over, an income or salary from or income from another business is a lot more evident. And if we look down to formal savings, men also more likely to use formal savings to start their business. Right at the bottom, we have credit, so formal credit or informal credit or a loan from friends or family. And you can see that that's really low across the board as the main source of capital, of startup capital. If we look at credit more broadly, though, so here we're considering all credit usage, current credit usage. So that's not necessarily for the business. It could be for personal or household or business reasons. And we're just showing this in a strand. So you can see we've got our females 26 and above at the top, males 26 and above in the middle, and the youth at the bottom. And basically, it's because it's in a strand, what we're looking at is first we're looking at if those segments have any formal credit usage, so that's the pink section. Then if they don't have any formal credit usage, do they have any informal credit usage? And that's the portion in yellow. And then if they don't have any informal or formal, are they borrowing from family and friends, which is that social credits in green. And what you can see from the slide is that men 26 and over are a lot more likely to be using formal credit, over a third, 34%, compared to about 24% of women and 21% of youth. Those females aged 26 and over, you can see that a much larger proportion are using informal, no formal, 28%, compared to just 19% of males. So the data does seem to back up the qualitative in terms of access to credit. And just going on to the next challenge, I'll hand back over to Carol.
Okay. So one of the issues, I think one of the things that you saw from the previous slides is that level of sophistication is also about keeping records. So what came across is that women and youth retailers are less likely to conduct regular stock checks, and they're also less likely to keep detailed business records. And that's why you can see a lot of them then will be in the less sophisticated categories. So one of the issues of why they don't keep records is a lot of them say that, what is the value? I am seated in my own shop. I know everything that is happening. And then there's also the issue that even if I take stock taking, it's also a very tedious exercise. So when they describe the imagery of taking stocks, they imagine you need ladders, women need to climb ladders, and that's not something they're going to do. Then there is lack of time. And this affects women more than men. And this is because a lot of times when they think about record keeping, they think it's something that you need to do at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, they're rushing home to take care of their children, to cook and everything else. You can see someone there saying that I have house chores to take care of, like cooking, so I must sacrifice my time by waking up early and sleeping late, unlike men who believe house chores are women's responsibility. So if they don't have the time and they keep postponing these activities like record keeping to the end of the day, and that's a time that is very competitive for them. And then there's also the issue that it's a replication of effort. So a lot of these small outlets, and especially the women and the youth, more so women, they felt that if you keep receipts, then that suffices everything else, that you will not get any new information by keeping any record. And just to go back in terms of lack of perceived value, they don't see that those records are likely to give them anything else. So the idea that you can use these records to access credit did not come up among all the interviews we had with the women. Yet we had a few older men who realized that if you keep these records, you can use them as a basis to access some credit. And then another reason why they will not keep records is that they assume that it's mainly for accountability to a third person. So they assume that you only keep records if you employ people and you need to check on what they are doing. Yeah. So if it's a business that is run by a husband and wife and there is trust, then they don't see the need of any record keeping in that situation. Next. So not only do they, okay, so for sure many of them will not keep records, but what came across is that most of the females will not invest in a computer system to keep records. And one of the things they were wondering is, what will it tell me that is different from what I have written in my books? And especially the older women who, have very little exposure to that kind of technology, it becomes very difficult. And I think you heard the story about Dominic that Claire said, where Dominic is very sophisticated, but when the wife is in the shop, she will use a calculator and write things down, and Dominic will have to come in the evening and key in everything. Yeah. So what comes across is that women don't really have confidence in this technology, because I also think that they feel that sometimes, how do I know if I've made an error or something like that? And the fact that there's something happening in the background, and they just think it's tedious and it's a replication of what you've already done in your written record. So it adds no value at all.
And just to look at some data on that, so again, looking at FinAcces, and there are some indicators on access to technology, and again, comparing our different segments, so women 26 and above, men 26 above, and that youth segment. And what we can see is that mobile ownership across those segments is very high. Mostly they own their own phones and use it themselves, slightly higher for that older male segment, but again, pretty high across the board. However, when we look at some of those mobile capability indicators, a bit more of a difference starts to emerge. So we've just chosen some indicators here, but if you look at that top one, for example, so can you download and install apps? You can see about a third of women aged 26 and above versus about half of the other segments, the men and the youth segment. Likewise, if you look at access to email, second from the bottom, again, about a third of those women aged 26 and above compared to about half of men and youth segments. And if we just look at have you used the internet in the past month, in the last 4 weeks? And again, you can see quite a large difference there. So only about a quarter of those women business owners in the wholesale and retail trade, about 40% of men, and the highest access was in that youth segment, just under half of those youth traders. So definitely a skew, especially towards the youth in terms of access to technology, with older women specifically having a slightly lower access. And I'll just hand back to Carol for the next challenge.
Yes. So the next challenge that we say that cuts across all retail traders was low margins, but this seems to affect women more so than men. So one of the issues is that men have the ability to buy back because they have more operating capital with them. So they're able to go and negotiate, for example, with a distributor, while a woman will maybe just talk to the neighboring wholesaler. So men traders are able to access the volume discounts. And there's a quote there about, for men with well-established businesses, they may get the stock delivered directly from the manufacturer, which is the most ideal, and everything is much cheaper. And remember, in retail, 1 shilling makes a huge difference. So that's quite, then the men become more competitive than the women. And then as you saw, and you also saw the case of Dominic, is that women and youth are less likely to have employees or even to have unpaid relatives who can stay in the shop for them to go around shopping for better deals. And what came across in the retail, there's a lot of movement from distributor to distributor, from wholesaler to wholesaler, trying to get the best rates. And therefore, what came across is that women are more likely unable to leave the shop because they're the only ones there. Sometimes they're there with a small child. So they depend a lot on people who are delivering to the shop, and therefore they might not necessarily get the best prices. And then another comment that came across is that men tend to be more aggressive in terms of negotiating. And of course, negotiating here is because first and foremost, the men have had that opportunity to walk around and know that shop X is offering this at 2% discount, and then come back again and say, oh, but your neighbor there is giving me at this. So that is because they have the time and they're able to leave their shops and move around to do that. So when you're in this trade, you have to be aggressive as a man in order to get the best deal. So some women recognize that for me to survive, I'll need to start moving around. I need to check all the shops, and I'm able to use that fact to be able to negotiate and get a better price. Next. So overall, because liquidity is core in terms of running these retail outlets, we find that male-run retail businesses are perceived to have better liquidity than women, and then those that are run by youth. So one thing that was very clear, and I think you saw about the profile of Dominic. So when you have somebody else to stay in your shop, what happens that you can open several shops, and they don't have to be in the same locality. So you could have someone like Dominic, he has a shop, then you go down the line, you find he has a butchery, then on the other corner he has an M-Pesa. When women will tend to run all businesses in that one little address. So the woman, one of the profiles we had is a lady who had an M-Pesa shop, she had a beauty shop, she had a shop, all in one premises, because she doesn't have the ability to move around. And of course, what means you're selling to the same clients over and over again, which means, of course, you end up not having as much traffic as someone who has shops that are located in different corners. And then older men are quite disadvantaged because over the years, they have built up a business which has been able to help them invest in their own premises. And rent is a key driver in terms of the operating costs for these businesses. So if older men have the shop, then everything else is easier for them. They can be able to give a 1 shilling off and be comfortable with the profits they make. And then, as indicated before, of course, because they're less liquid, they are not ending up not getting volume discount, and it becomes a spiral. It goes on, and therefore they also make less profits. And then finally, we find that women business owners actually operate fewer hours. So in the study, we found that sometimes they were operating 3 hours less than their counterparts because they are opening up late because they have to sort out issues to do with the home, and then they're closing early because they have to sort out issues to do with the home. And actually, when school is in session, that morning hour is very important because apparently parents come in to buy snacks, kids are buying something to take to school, and within the first hour, you make some money to pay for the people who are making daily deliveries. And then, although security was a concern across all areas, all businesses, what we find is that women in a certain area, even if you're able to open slightly longer, if your counterparts who are men close their shops, you will also close your shop because you're a bit worried of being left as the only shop that is there. Yet among the men, we had shops that were opening 2 hours later after everybody else has closed their shops. Yeah. So that verbatim just illustrates everything.
Thanks, Carol. So that's so those challenges, and I think that, as Carol mentioned, they cross-cut across all business owners, but a lot of them are just more acutely felt by women and youth for a variety of reasons. But obviously, looking at all of those different challenges, digital solutions can assist with all of them. So just to look at what are the opportunities and challenges with regards to implementing digital solutions. So firstly, while a lot of the respondents that were interviewed weren't currently using digital solutions, a lot of them could see the benefits of these. And some of the benefits noted by respondents were the better tracking of sales and more accurate business reports. So quite a lot of the respondents saw how better business intelligence could improve their competitiveness and make them operate more efficiently and thereby just increase their profits. Time saved was a big benefit noted, mostly by those older female business owners. And as Carol mentioned, in a few instances, what we found is that a lot of those women business owners are often juggling household responsibilities with their business responsibilities. And it seems like quite a juggling act to make sure that they spend enough time in their business, but also manage to kind of deal with those household responsibilities. So time saved was a big benefit noted by those respondents. Another benefit was control, so better control of the shop. A lot of business owners spoke about not necessarily wanting employees because they may lose control of their shop and not know what's going on in their shop. And what they saw as a possible benefit of digital solutions would be that they could monitor their sales in real time and off-site. So just keeping much better control over what's going on. And then the last one, which is quite interesting, because it came up as a positive and also a negative, was the improved visibility, and specifically the improved visibility of sales. And that was seen as a positive because it can be used to firstly acquire finance and also to just generate better terms with suppliers. So a couple of quotes. So you can see a 34-year-old female. A digital solution will help me make accurate calculations of how my business is doing, stock taking, sales, and profit. The product can make me strategize to get someone to help me with the sales when I'm not around, rather than closing the shop and losing customers. Also, the product will help create a lot of confidence with my suppliers. And then the bottom quote, just a 30-year-old male talking about that visibility issue. So I think not many youth and women understand what opportunities come with such kind of reports. You can use those reports to get bank loans or even get major suppliers on the basis of such reports. So while a whole lot of benefits were mentioned by the respondents, there were also a lot of challenges that came up, either directly from the respondents or more indirectly. And just to run through some of those challenges. So the first one is risk aversion. So the respondents perceived younger business owners as being bigger risk takers, whereas especially older women business owners as being perceived as quite risk averse. And there were a number of reasons given for that. Limited resources, a fear of failure, thoughts about the future. It could also be the fact that they do have higher household responsibilities, so those responsibilities might make them more risk averse. But for a variety of reasons, respondents saw those women business owners being less likely to take on new technology. And just a quote you can see, and that's actually from a younger female, 27 years old. Women have a fear of failure and will not commit to anything unless they are sure it will work for them. Openness to new technology came up. Again, specifically older women perceived to be the least likely to adopt new technologies. Quite a lot of quotes from respondents just saying that learning a new system would likely be quite challenging for them, and they're quite used to the current processes that they have in their stores. Also that these solutions are perceived as just not necessary for smaller businesses. They're seen as things that are used by much larger stores where there's multiple employees and lots of customers coming in. And for smaller stores, they just don't really see the value add. So you can see that quote from an older female, 49 years old. It would be a challenge for me because I have no knowledge whatsoever of using a computer. It will slow me down very much. It means I may have to employ someone to work on it. I think supermarkets use this kind of system to reduce theft cases from employees. The only people who are in this shop is me and my husband, and we trust each other, so we don't need it. And then also, I think quite an obvious one, and I think again, cuts across everyone in the retail sector, is just the ability to invest in new solutions. So in the smaller stores, especially, margins are very low. Liquidity is often constrained, especially for women and youth business owners. And so there is not so much affordability to invest in expensive new solutions. Some other challenges, so the strong relationships and set processes of these retailers, which might not seem like a challenge, but can be if a new solution would disrupt those relationships or disrupt those processes. For example, a lot of retailers spoke about creating smaller quantities for their customers. So, for example, stock solutions that aren't flexible enough to allow for that wouldn't be used properly. And when talking about suppliers, for example, a lot of retailers spoke about how they had grown with their suppliers and with the support of their suppliers. So those relationships being very important to them. So as I mentioned, the visibility issue came up as a positive and a negative. And I was quite surprised by how many respondents brought up that visibility and data protection with digital solutions. So the respondents really just worried about who is monitoring that data. So you can see a quote from a 34-year-old male there. The people managing the system and viewing the data may set you up with thugs in the KRA because they are able to know how much the shop makes at any given time. And also some suppliers may be able to monitor the trend in your sales. So just general discomfort around who actually sees their shop data. Unstable power supply was brought up, again, pretty much across the board, doesn't necessarily affect one group more than another. And then the last challenge that came up was security concerns. And I think specifically if digital solutions require expensive hardware, could that make shops a target for criminals? And that was especially noted by women. And while security, as Carol mentioned, came up across the board, it was perceived that women experienced that more strongly. And you can see a quote from a 35-year-old female there. It requires computer knowledge, which most of us don't have, and also maintaining it in terms of security. It will force us to either carry the system home or employ a watchman to man the shop, which is an extra cost. So given all these challenges and opportunities, what are some of the strategies that a digital solution could employ to overcome some of these and encourage adoption? So the first one is pretty obvious, but I think even more important in this sector, just because margins are low. And that's to have a very clear value proposition of how the solution is going to help. So given those low margins, especially within that women and youth segment, there really needs to be a clear value add before traders are going to be willing to integrate a new system. Solutions that promote time-saving efficiencies are likely to resonate with women. So again, I think it came up very strongly, those domestic responsibilities for women, impacting on the time that they could spend in their businesses. So any solution that talks about allowing more time for family would probably resonate with that segment. Solutions that offer liquidity and facilitate bulk discounts are likely to resonate with all business owners. So those were key challenges that all business owners face. Obviously, there's low margins, high competition. So any way to improve their profitability would be good. And then another pretty obvious one, it must be affordable for small business owners. And I think not just affordable, also that payments for the system need to be linked to cash flows. Obviously, cash flows are up and down, so any kind of system has to be affordable for that business owner. Another one, I think again quite obvious but really important, simple. The systems must be simple to use and have a lot of support to assist the business owner with integration. So some of the segments are less tech savvy. A lot of them were quite worried about taking on new technology. So simple systems with lots of support would just help ensure a smooth integration and also that the solution is used correctly. I think in a lot of cases, solutions are implemented and the business owner might partly use them, but if they're not used to their kind of full capacity, then you're not getting the full benefits out of it. The systems or solutions must also integrate into how the business owner currently runs their business. As mentioned, a lot of these business owners have really strong relationships with their customers and with their suppliers. They also have specific ways of doing things. And to the extent that solutions can't be integrated to fit these processes and these relationships, they're unlikely to be taken up. And then just the last suggestion, testimonials, referrals, face-to-face contact, allowing for pilots or test runs could all assist. And specifically with those more risk-averse segments. So just giving people the room to experiment, also to have referrals from people they know, would just help them maybe take a plunge and pick up a new solution. And that's all. Thanks, everyone. Are there any questions or comments, or maybe I can hand back over to FSD? just to open up discussion.
Thank you so much, Claire and Carol. That was a fantastic presentation. So yeah, we have actually a lot of questions, and a lot of them coming from Damola actually. So I might let him start off by asking, perhaps by collating his questions. Before I do that, yeah, I just wanted to really appreciate, the quality of the work here and the value of using both qualitative and quantitative data, but also to sort of reiterate the point that I made at the beginning, that this really opens up a whole set of questions that we need to investigate further. So some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat also relate to, to what extent do some of these gendered disadvantages or dynamics also apply, to youth. I mean, are youth able to overcome some of the challenges, perhaps relating to education, tech savviness, et cetera, flexibility that the older women do experience, given that a lot of youth are younger women, are they perhaps overcoming some of those challenges? How much do these challenges actually apply to the incoming generation, really, of businesses? Will we see changes because of their wider exposure or perhaps their position? Or are we talking about, an ongoing kind of gendered kind of, in a way, power dynamic where women actually have less education, less access to assets and collateral, less ability to sort of build up networks and so forth, that men are able to do, and of course, far more responsibility for households and families. So one thing I'm really seeing here is the impact of those sort of divided responsibilities, in terms of women's ability to have the sort of flexibility and mobility to do business, and possibly also their risk aversion. And we also see from our data that a lot of young women, I mean, even in their 20s, actually already take on those family responsibilities. So much more than young men, young women are already having responsibilities for kids. They may belong to those young men, but the men don't seem to have those same responsibilities in their 20s. Men tend to take on those responsibilities more in their 30s. And so it may be very important to also consider how to enable women to juggle these two roles successfully and do well in business, because we've clearly seen that they've got a lot of aspiration. And as business women, I mean, some of them, really, some of our top business people are actually women. And, you certainly see the classic image of the strong businesswoman. I certainly used to see that in my field work, that women, in a sense, are the pioneers of business in Kenya through their relationship with the informal sector. So I'd like to hand over, to the floor, really, for questions. So maybe I will start with Damola. I mean, you have a whole bunch of questions, and I don't know whether you want to pick out a few of them, or whether you would like me just to pick out some of them for you. Perhaps I'll let you do that, actually, Damola. Maybe pick out some of the questions that you've asked. They're very interesting and important questions, and we can also go through the chat afterwards, and perhaps send you something after this presentation as well, in answer to the more specific points that you've raised.
Thanks, Amrik, and thank you to Carol and Claire for the insightful piece of work that you guys have done. So, I mean, I was asking the questions as the presentation was going on. So, yeah, I think I'll wait for you to collate at the end, but I'll just maybe ask one particular question in relation to the gender disparities. So if we think about some of the markers of success for businesses, which might be the number of years in business in terms of maturity, the location of the business. So if you're in a highly densely populated area, or maybe in the central business district, for instance, the number of hours. That there was a comment that kind of aligns with the question I'm about to ask. The number of hours opened. Does the disparity that we're seeing in terms of profit margin still show from the analysis? I'm not sure if that was done. I think that's an interesting area for us as well, in terms of the kind of work we're doing around MSMEs to think about, but it would be interesting to get a sense of whether or not it's something you've touched on in your work. Thanks.
Hi, Damola. Maybe I can jump in first. It's nice to hear your voice. It's been such a long time. And thanks so much for the questions. Maybe I can just quickly answer some of your questions on the quant sides, and then I'll hand over to Carol because she has a much better idea, I think, in terms of the profile of respondents and where they were and how that affected them. But I think your point, especially on the age of the business being a big factor, definitely. And I think if we look at that, thinking back to that segmentation from the low to the high sophistication, we have that indicator. And I think it's a very good point to put in that, yes, newer businesses tend to be more low, although not all the time. So I think we can add that data point in for you there. And then Carol, I'm not sure if you have any other anything else to add.
Yes. So in terms of the issue about profit margins comes mainly from the qualitative, and all these outlets were in high density areas. So we are comparing likes to likes. And then in terms of the age of the business, I think it could be also even a business that has been established for some years could have the same issue about having lower margins, because if you're not able, for example, you might have been in business as a woman for many years, but you've not been able to buy directly from the manufacturers purely because you're growing your business based on your savings. You've never really taken a big enough investment to be able to go out there and buy. So I don't know, we don't have enough data to be able to tell you that, but from a qualitative perspective, there might be no difference. I don't know. And also, as I'm telling you, everything now is in one geography. So we don't know whether if we did this in a different locality, we'll have different findings.
Damola, you also had a question actually on, tech and record keeping. So you had a question here where you asked if people accept payments digitally, is that seen as a form of record keeping? And how far does record keeping correlate with level of formal education as well?
Maybe I can even add one extra to that. So, I mean, there'll be different types of record keeping, I guess, practices. You could sort of monitor the traffic of people coming to your store. You could keep records of sales. You could, have a sense of inventory. So, the record keeping kind of runs across different business activities, but there are specific ones that are important, say, for a credit provider to assess risk, for instance. There are specific ones that might be important for decision making on what to stock and how to stock. So, I mean, record keeping has different uses, and for different users, the business owner could be seen as a user, while for the purpose of, say, to access some sort of financial services, whoever it is that the business owner is engaging might need the record for that as well. So it'll be interesting to get a sense of whether or not this was explored, plus the other aspects that you raised, Amrik. Thanks.
I don't know, Carol or Claire,
Yes.
would you like to take that?
So record keeping from the retailer's perspective was anything else, any extra activity they went where they are recording something in a different book. So for example, even if it's how much money have I received on M-Pesa, or do they transfer that into another record? And therefore, what we found that even when these shops, when you ask them, show me a record of your sales last month, show me a book, sometimes they just know how much money came in. Maybe they've just written something like, I got 10,000, but how they arrive at that 10,000 is not clear. Well, others had no paper trail whatsoever. They are able to, at the end of the day, look what is in the till and say, this is what I have sold, and I know I bought these things at this amount. So for them, record keeping is a conscious effort of recording, physically recording something.
Mm-hmm. And just to add to that, I think it's a really interesting question, Damola, because I think the M-Pesa side of things, I think more that we look at credit providers, the key indicator of risk for a business is what sales is flowing through your till. And obviously digital payment solutions record that immediately. So what I'd be interested in, and I'm not sure if anyone knows, is what data is recorded through a till number, and can the business owner access that easily? So I think we can definitely look into that.
Yeah, so there's easy record keeping that could actually almost happen by default through much greater use of these digital transaction devices or payments tools, etc. And then there's the sort of actual record keeping facilities that are specifically developed for that purpose. Sorry, there's an airplane going over as I speak, but I just wanted to link that to a point that Oscar was also raising on loans. You know, we keep talking about the importance of record keeping, partly to support your business strategizing and so forth, and perhaps your ability to grow ultimately, but also in terms of your visibility to the market and your ability to access investment and loans. So I think that also begs the question that Oscar was sort of raising, which is partly because he said he didn't hear it properly, but actually are businesses looking for more loans or not? Because we're also seeing that certainly for startup capital, loans played a very small role in that, and probably are far too risky really to be used for that purpose. People preferred to rely on their previous kind of business portfolios or this cross-fertilization across businesses, or from savings, or, you know, their family networks where, you know, you had, it was perhaps less risky to do so. You had almost like a joint investment there. But clearly credit was widely used in other circumstances. So possibly for working capital, possibly for personal reasons. We're not quite clear. The data doesn't tell us. So I guess, yeah, the question on loans, you know, how important really are loans to businesses, and therefore how much could record keeping add in order to, for people to actually get more access to loans, or does it actually increase your riskiness?
Okay, just maybe I can just add a point there. So, and even the study we are doing right now, formal credit for startup was seen as a very expensive option, with actually people putting more weight on creating relationships with suppliers to be able to get some form of credit, more so than going outright for formal credit. And then for these particular outlets, when you look at their daily operations, some of the money they would be looking for, the ticket size is relatively small. So they're talking about maybe 10,000 shillings to buy some supplies, and that they will be able to return the money probably in that same week. So for startup, I don't think a lot of them are very keen on interacting with formal credit because they assume it's very expensive. But maybe in terms of day-to-day operations, they might, but maybe the ticket size for this particular business is relatively small, and maybe the ticket size that can be financed through mobile apps or chamas, and that's why the women actually, all these women we talk to are all in chamas, where they get that amount of money to put into their business, and then they continue.
And we found that in some of our other work, actually, that, you know, this embedding these financial tools in relationships is a strategy that many Kenyans use across the board for different purposes. And I think that's what you're bringing out here, you know, that if you've cultivated strong relationships with particular suppliers, you know, that becomes a kind of a more, a better route for you in terms of credit access. That will possibly, you know, your charmer, similarly, you've got long-term relationships, you have a lot of information on each other, you have trust. And I think trust is really a theme that runs right through this presentation. And I think it has lots of implications for the use of these digital tools as well, that they have to, in a sense, become sufficiently sort of intuitive and really part of the business for one to sort of put one's trust in them, because clearly at the moment people are putting a lot of trust in their relationships and leveraging those relationships to run their businesses, whether financially or in other respects. Just coming on to another point of Oscar's here, he asks if we can tell us a little bit more about the barriers to registration. So, you know, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that there's many of these businesses actually have very sort of low levels of registration. I guess that was the non-sophisticated businesses. And do we have any insights, he asks, as to why they are not registered? For example, costs of registration, bureaucracy, tax, or just lack of awareness? I mean, you did mention the online issue, but perhaps you could speak to that a little bit more.
Okay. So this was not explored in detail in this study, but we are doing other work that is actually dealing specifically with those issues. So remember that registration is not compulsory for some categories. So people who work in Jua Kali need not be registered with anybody. Women who sell vegetables in Wakulima market, for example, need not any registration. So registration becomes a feature when you get premises, which is called the single business permit. And the single business permit, to be honest, even based on from the people we talked to here and the people we are talking to now, the process does not seem to be a barrier. And actually, there's no way out. You cannot open a physical premises in Nairobi without a single business barrier. But remember, MSME is a broad group of entrepreneurs. So at the lower end, it's not a requirement for you to have it. So I think the quant data, remember, also includes these people who, for example, sell by the side of the road, I think, and people who have little stalls that are made of semi-permanent stalls, actually temporary stalls on roadwalks. For those ones, they might not need any permit other than paying probably what we call cess to the government.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
and as Carol says,
what we are doing right now is what is going to be very clear about what registration is. So just to give you a quick insight, what is coming across is that registration is a very vague name. People really don't even know. When you run a campaign, say, please register your businesses, people think it's incorporation, securing a name, getting a city council permit, and city council permit actually takes precedent over everything else because you can't operate without it.
Right, and as Carol says, we're actually just embarking on another collaborative study at the moment where we are really sort of putting this issue front and center, you know, particularly in relation to the whole area of formality and what does formality mean and what are the barriers to formality. Whereas the presentation you've just heard was really more around sort of the role of digitization and technology in business development and potential barriers for women and youth. Just to take us back a little bit, Felicitas has a question on youth. I mean, where she actually brings up some data from another study which found that women, and she's wondering whether this perhaps applies more to younger women, because it was a study on youth, were actually working longer hours than their male counterparts and making more money, even though they actually ended up having smaller margins. But this was particularly in the group of 18 to 25 years old. And again, I think the data that we have from this particular study, where we have a very small qual sample and a large sort of amorphous quant sample, may not enable us to really address that point, but clearly echoing some of Damola's points, you know, I think age is obviously a crucial factor here other than just gender. So I don't know whether you had any reflections on that, Carol or Claire, you know, because she's just basically asking if women actually operate fewer hours across all ages, or whether this is particularly applicable to older women who perhaps have responsibilities for children and so forth.
Okay. As you say, as Amrika said, of course, our sample, we struggled to get 18 to 25-year-olds who have built enough resources to take a physical presence, a physical premises, and that's we've seen that over and over again. So we might not have enough of that age band to provide conclusive feedback. But also 18 to 25 young people get into certain businesses. They probably get into online businesses that they can continue operating way in the night, I assume. And therefore, if you have a young lady who bakes at home and sells online, and probably a lot of those 18 to 25 women might be running businesses which are running in their home setting. So the issue of security and having to close early might not be a factor. And they're selling their product online, so they can be on it for longer. So we can only speculate for now because we don't have enough information on that profile with our sample to be able to provide any conclusive comments on that.
And it also actually argues for another effort that FSD is sort of quite keen on at the moment, which is really beginning to integrate these data sources, because we've got a lot of people collecting data on MSMEs all over the shop, you know, whether it's quant or qual, and we don't really have a sort of a coordinated working group to enable us to sort of bring this data together and really derive some key insights and possibly jointly invest in a kind of a more coordinated set of data tools where we can systemize the data. But what's really great about all these different studies is that they're helping us to define the right questions. Because I think if we use our classic economic models and apply them to MSMEs, we are simply going to be missing a lot of the points. We're not going to be generating the right questions. We really need to use a more socio-economic approach, as we've done in this study when we've been looking at sort of gender and youth and informality and relationships and social networks and so forth, you know, these other drivers of what's actually going on. So I'm sort of excited as we're moving forward to start coordinating this research and maybe also collaborating with people who are collecting data on youth as well. So yeah, just on another question that was being raised by Felicitas, again relating to youth. I mean, well, just a comment really that, you know, she sees huge potential in these digital solutions for youth in particular, who are quite kind of receptive to digital tools, if some of these challenges can be addressed. So I think perhaps there's a question to not just Carol and Claire, but maybe to the wider group on, you know, do we see some of these potential challenges that are being faced, particularly by women, you know, access to capital, limited mobility, you know, trust issues, you know, inability to perhaps employ people because you have lack of trust in them. Do you see those potentially being overcome through use, you know, via a broader access to technology? I mean, I guess in a way that was probably a bit of a silly question because Claire and Carol were suggesting at the end of their presentation that yes, technology could help us to overcome some of these challenges. But I mean, I guess so Felicitas is particularly asking us to really think about about youth in particular, you know, and whether that would be something that an age group that perhaps we should really focus on as we're trying to develop these solutions, because you may have actually fewer barriers in terms of, you know, digital literacy and so forth, and ability to sort of trust technology to actually solve some of these problems. So maybe I'll just throw it out there. If anyone wants to comment, fine. But if not, you know, please also do ask some more questions because you've still got a few minutes left. So
maybe I can comment on that point, Amrik. So I think, yes, we should focus on youth because we are now seeing youth who are starting their entrepreneurial journey online. So their first business is to connect with people who they don't know, because a lot of this profile you are talking to, it's about trust. So moving to an online system, they want to see and they want to feel their suppliers, they want to see and feel their customers. But we have a generation that starts their entrepreneurial journey from their homes, selling to people who they know, dealing with suppliers who they've never seen and customers they've never seen. So they probably are already, they're already receptive and they're open to more of that kind of technology, I think.
Great. And I mean, obviously, we see they are already in an organic sense using that technology, because we have another study going on in Mathare with youth entrepreneurs, which shows that just simple access to a smartphone has created huge benefits for those businesses. And they're doing a lot of sort of online marketing and also online, you know, upskilling, you know, so they're learning a lot about their particular business area or sector, you know, via kind of accessing online tools. So, yeah, there's obviously a lot of incredible potential in that area if we can jump on that and in a more sort of organized fashion. And clearly people are doing so. So there's already a lot of initiatives in play. Does anyone else want to make any comments at this stage? Gosh, there's a resounding silence. I mean, so what I think I'll do is I'll take that as, I mean, please do send us your comments on email, because, you know, we can still address these. And meanwhile, you know, all the people who've been part of this meeting and others, of course, as well, will actually specifically let you know or send you, in fact, the output from the study. We're probably going to produce it as a sort of a PowerPoint deck report, which actually will have more detail than the presentation that you've just heard. So we'll be circulating that as well. And then we'll also keep you informed of this other very exciting work that we're beginning to get involved with as well. So with that, I want to say thank you very much for joining us, and I will now thank again Carol and Claire. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat really applauding their effort, and they've really done a fantastic job. So yeah, thank you very much, Carol, Claire, and teams, and also to Eva, who's also played a very important role in coordinating this study, and of course to our tech partner, who will remain nameless at this stage. So with that, I would like to close the meeting and wish you all a lovely day. Okay, bye then.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Emric. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hi, thank you.